It was in his grandmother's room, in a house that smelled of beeswax candles and old oak and beech planks, worn smooth by generations. The wall clock ticked unevenly, as if wavering between the present and something far behind. Beneath the bed, the floorboards creaked every time someone passed. But that evening, no one passed, yet the creaking was heard. In the corner of the room stood a large antique mirror, perhaps even from his great-grandmother, with thin cracks along its edges that resembled a spider's web. Through the old windows with glass crafted by hand, who knows when or where, the afternoon light spilled across the floor, casting long, wavering shadows. Vladimir watched it deep into the night, until it seemed to him that the mirror no longer reflected his image, but a version of the room that seemed to hesitate, slightly delayed, as if whatever was on the other side was trying to catch up to him, but always remained half a step behind. He did not flee. He sat on the floor, very close to the shimmering surface, pulled his knees to his chest and looked straight into his own gaze, which might not have been his at all. "Are you there?" he whispered. The reflection did not answer, but in the next moment he himself heard the reply, not with his ears, but in his chest, like an echo through his bones. "I always have been." He did not scream, nor did he stand up. He just remained there, curled within himself, as a shiver ran through his body, a feeling akin to curiosity, or even longing, not fear, as if he had heard something he had always known, but pretended not to remember, for Vladimir had always had strange coincidences. Even his arrival into this world happened at the 11th hour, always on the edge, always a step before something you could not name, but knew existed. There was a moment in his early teenage years when Vladimir realized he wasn't attracted to people. He wasn't drawn to what was usually implied: socializing, noise, the feeling of belonging to a group. He practiced sports occasionally, winning a medal here and there. He also dabbled in music, which would later much more intensely mark his life. But even then, in those moments of victory, he felt he wasn't entirely there, as if only his body participated, while something else within him, some ancient consciousness, patiently waited for it all to end. He wasn't particularly social either, except for those rare few who saw the world askew, for those whom others called odd, but who spoke of overlapping times, of places that were not places, of dreams in which one did not sleep. Children often liked to fantasize. They played, invented, escaped into worlds. But Vladimir did not have to invent, for he knew that whispers from the void should not be called. They were already there. One only needed to listen and to know when not to answer. One evening, he stayed alone in the apartment. There was a silence, you know, but never get used to. A waiting silence. He knew he no longer wanted to be silent and wait. He walked to an old building, less than a 5-minute walk from his own. Its facade was cracked, resembling an old wrinkled face, and the windows on the upper floors gaped empty, like the eyes of a long-forgotten being. To the top floor, where there was an attic no one had used for years, as if it had always been that way, and that no one intended to change anything, except. The door was ajar. He had a lamp, a notebook, a pencil. He wasn't going to investigate, nor to prove anything. He felt more that something was luring him, like an ancient call that could not be refused. He sat on the concrete floor, propped up by old planks, in a room without glass in the windows, just frames, which creaked with the flow of the spring wind. The ceiling was crisscrossed with knots in the wood that, in the dim light of the lamp, resembled eyes. He wrote in his notebook, If you are still there, I am ready." Then he was silent. At first, nothing. Only coldness, the smell of dust, a sound you don't know if it comes from outside or within. But then something moved. Not in the room, within him. It wasn't a voice, but a deep feeling he could not understand, yet clearly knew it did not originate from himself. The next morning, he did not wake suddenly. He did not jump from sleep, nor did he have a dream he could recount. He simply opened his eyes. But the world had not changed in colors, nor in sounds, but in distance. Things were slightly further away than usual. The doorknob, the wall opposite the bed, even the light coming through the window, as if they were there, but not quite on the same plane as him. He ran his hand across his face. His skin was his own, but it wasn't. He couldn't say why. Perhaps because the touch lacked that same confirmation of identity, that silent feeling of, "That's me." He walked to school the same way, crossed the same asphalt, past the same newsstand. But his steps felt lighter. It wasn't a feeling of flying, but of an incomprehensible absence of a burden he hadn't even noticed carrying before. No one said anything to him. No one noticed. Only one woman on the bus looked at him, a stranger with a chestnut scarf and hands full of shopping bags. She looked at him, not as a child, but as an ancient soul who knew something. She saw her as an icon in eternity. She trembled, looked away, and quietly crossed herself. Vladimir saw this. He did not smile. He just looked out the window. Out there, everything seemed the same. But inside, something was looking through him. Several days passed. Days flowed in the usual rhythm of school obligations, afternoon games with friends, and evening conversations with his grandmother, parents, or an occasional girl, accompanied by the scent of tea or Coca-Cola, that old kind, in glass bottles of 0.2 or 1 liter, which used to hit your nose with its large CO2 bubbles, unlike what is called that today, and the sound of old radio shows. Although seemingly nothing significant had happened, the world around Vladimir was no longer the same. Things he had previously looked at without thinking. The grills on old building windows, metal street number plates, shadows from lampposts breaking across facades, now held him with some inexplicable force. He didn't observe them for their beauty, nor for anything eerie, but for a vague presence that resided within them, as if the things themselves returned his gaze. One day, returning from school, he spontaneously turned into a street he had never walked down before. On the other side of the main road, where the muffled sounds of the city could be heard, the smell of barbecue from a nearby garden mingled with a distant, melancholic melody from some tavern. He didn't know why. Perhaps that was reason enough. He felt an irresistible pull, something silently drawing him forward. At the end of the street stood an old telephone booth. It was out of order, abandoned, spray-painted, the work of older youths, whose motives Vladimir still didn't understand to this day. Without definition, without meaning. Many such booths stood in every neighborhood and district, always the same, always ignored. Why there? Why that one? He didn't enter, nor did he stop. He just walked past. But in that passing, he had a clear sensation as if it had rung, though he heard no sound. He turned around. There was no one. The booth door was closed, but it was as if it had soundlessly released something moments before. In his chest, a hum reappeared. It wasn't a word, nor a clear sound, but a deep, subtle shift, as if someone was calling him, but without a voice. It was Sunday, early morning. Libraries at that time, in the late 70s and early 80s, were open from 7 to 11 in the morning. It was still a carefree period of human civilization. People were simply people. There was no need for declarations of equality, nor for slogans. It was known, felt. It did not need to be spoken aloud. It was also known that many people smoked. Cigarette smoke permeated the air even in hospitals, cut through rooms, seeped into them, and clung to clothes. The smell of ashtrays, though accepted then, would be a warning today. But at that time, although cancer was already spreading, little was yet known about it. Still, the library was almost empty, smelling of bound paper and a faint, dusty sunbeam piercing through the blinds. Vladimir ran his fingers over the titles on the shelf that did not interest him. He was short, so he could barely reach the top shelf on his tiptoes. The title did not call out to him loudly, nor was it inscribed in gold letters like later books used to attract attention. Back then, one had to either read or sense. There was no embellishment, neither of reality nor of events. Everything was as it was. Black holes, quasars, and the universe. A title that did not look like a children's book, and indeed, it was not. He opened it there, leaning against the wall between two shelves full of books, and already in the first paragraph, he felt something he had never felt before, that he was not looking at the pages, but they were looking at him. There were words he did not know, but he did not even try to translate them. He felt the meaning, not through reason, but through an image, drawn for him by still unknown words, yet recognizable in the very core of his being. He took the book home. That evening, he did not turn on the light. Only the night lamp glowed. He placed a pillow under his chin, the book on his knees, and read, not to memorize, but simply to immerse himself, to be there. Somewhere beyond the words about quasars, beyond mathematical formulas that looked like stellar wind, a chasm lay hidden, black, bottomless, merciless. And he knew it was not fiction. What stood there? It was not invented. In that literature, Vladimir found himself, felt it was a part of him, something that had called him even before he knew why. He read it over and over for days, almost passionately in love with the desire to delve into secrets. It was like a struggle, a quiet contest between desired knowledge and persistent incomprehension. He wanted more. Those pages lured him like a distant sound, but at the same time they eluded him, appearing vague and incomprehensible, challenging him to dig deeper. Every line read was a step further, every new term an invitation to even greater understanding. Perseverance did not abandon him, driven by an unquenchable desire to unveil the curtain that separated the visible from the incomprehensible, the known from the unknown, reality from dream. That night, Vladimir did not dream, or at least he believed so. Perhaps the dreams were hidden deeply, in layers where thought loses language, even deeper, in what Freud would call merely ID. But for Vladimir, it was not a mere theory, nor a psychological term, but a tangible place. Or more precisely, the dream did not come. It was as if it had always been there. It simply opened suddenly. Like heavy doors you patiently wait to creak open on their own, because you know you could never move them. He sat. He did not know where. There were no walls, and the floor was smooth, gray, without edges, like the back of his grandmother's ancient mirror, that forgotten side of reflection that does not return an image, but evokes a deep feeling. The sky, if it could be called that, pulsed with a faint bluish glow, like skin beneath which light flickers in the darkness of infinity, in the silence of eternity. He breathed, though he was not sure he had lungs. It seemed that everything around him breathed. even the light that enveloped him. He looked at his hands. They were his, but they were not childlike, long, pale, with regular fingers. They were the hands of an adult man he did not know, yet he knew these were his hands one day. Or perhaps they already were. And then he heard, not a sentence, not a voice, but pure meaning. It etched itself into his mind, without words. "You are not the first to look here." He flinched, but his body did not move. It was stone, motionless, with the weight of a white dwarf, compressed by its own powerful presence. He wanted to speak, but not with his mouth. He wanted to flee, but not with his legs. He wanted to know. And then, an image. It was not his, an organism of black spiral constructions, structures resembling a city, but made of organic living tissue. It was movement through time, but not back and forth, but left to right, as if reality was just one of countless possibilities, and it changed by a simple change of direction, a glowing horizon that bent by itself, a star that coiled inward, gazes he did not see, but he knew and felt on his skin, if it could still be called skin, that he was seen, and a place of which he had never heard, yet he knew its name, and he knew this was what had always been waiting for him, what had called him, what he had yearned for. He woke without a start. The bed was his, and the room, and the window, and the old table beside the bed. Everything was in its place, but something fundamentally was not. The space between objects, it was not the same, as if the room itself was stretching, not expanding or moving, but changing the relationship between things. Like triplets in music, where it is not about a mere sequence of notes, but about vibrations that react with each other, mingle, influence, dance without an order that anyone could write down. The presence was not localized in one place. It was everywhere, in that invisible void in between. His mouth was dry, but not from sleep or thirst, but from something he had not spoken, some unspoken plea. There was nothing audible in the air, except perhaps his own heart, but a presence existed, dense, palpable, like when someone stands directly behind you, though you unshakably know you are completely alone. He got up and sat on the edge of the bed. His gaze fell to the floor, to the ordinary polished parquet. Yet he had a clear sensation that behind the floor lay another layer, not a basement, not some hidden room, but something that was looking up at him from some incomprehensible depth. Then it dawned on him. The dream was not his. He picked up his notebook. He opened the last blank page and wrote without thinking, "I was a visitor, or a host, or perhaps just a window." He closed the notebook. He looked out the window. The trees swayed gently in the morning wind. The day was ordinary, but for Vladimir, nothing was ordinary anymore. Absolutely nothing. The afternoon passed unnoticed. Vladimir sat at the table, leaning on his elbows without a book, without a sound, in that rare silence that fills rather than empties. There was no need to do anything. There was no boredom. He had his melodies in his head, those never-written ones, but which came in moments when the world was silent enough to hear them. It was just waiting, without awareness of anyone or anything being waited for, but with a feeling that something important was approaching. At one point, suddenly a thump was heard. The sound came from the mailbox under the stairs. It didn't sound like someone had inserted mail, more like something was already there, but had only now, finally, decided to fall, to appear, to announce itself. He went down, opened the mailbox. Inside, just one paper. Not an envelope, not an address. The paper was folded 3 times, slightly yellowed, as if someone had held it too long in their hand, perhaps waiting for the right moment to let it go. There was no signature. There was no date. Only one sentence, written in a hand that didn't bother to write neatly. She does not call. You are the one who hears. That was all. He turned the paper, blank. He smelled it. It smelled of dampness and old wood, of that part of the library where one no longer ventures, of a basement that was never yours, but whose key, somehow, you know. He looked up. The hallway was empty, windows closed, stairs quiet, but deep within himself he knew the truth. Someone had been there, and had left, yes, only when he himself had let them go. Vladimir sat back down at the table, holding the paper from the mailbox before him like an ancient artifact. It was something that should be handled with gloves, but his fingers, stubbornly, did not let go. He picked up his notebook, old, thick, leather-bound. In it he wrote without order, thoughts, drawings, and formulas he no longer understood. He randomly opened it, somewhere in the middle. On the right side, nothing, but on the left, it read, in his handwriting without a date, "She does not call. You are the one who hears." He paused, his breath caught. He placed the paper from the mailbox beside it, carefully, as if fearing it would vanish. He compared the words, the slant of the letters, every tiny detail. The message was identical, but he could not recall ever writing it, not when, nor why, nor under what circumstances. He flipped through the notebook backwards, frantically searching for a trace, a cause, a preceding train of thought. But everything was fragmented, disjointed. One paragraph about a dream at 3 months old, another about a sound that lingers even after waking, a third, a sketch of a structure resembling a human brain, but with more than one central core. Nowhere was there an explanation for the message, only the fact that it was already there, that it had always been there, and that it had arrived. Again. He was not afraid, but a feeling found him, permeating him to his core. It was not fear, nor apprehension, but something else, like seeing a shadow in a mirror, yet unshakably knowing you are alone. But this time he did not wish to retreat. On the contrary, it was as if he was challenging fate, or himself, or perhaps her. His voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but filled with resolve. "Good, I am listening. Good, I am listening." He said it aloud but quietly, as if confirming a presence, not as an invitation but as a final acceptance of what was to come. The air did not ripple. There was no flash of light, no vibration, no hum. Only a thought, suddenly clear, sharp as a blade, as if someone had just placed a sentence directly into his mind. Without tone, without language, yet perfectly comprehensible. You are the boundary, but you are not the end. He paused. His breathing did not change, but his heart did, quickening, almost in a strange rhythm of realization. The feeling could not be described. It was not panic, nor relief, but a finality woven into a sentence that spoke of the infinite, as if that message had always existed, etched deep beneath the layers of everyday understanding, and now it had merely surfaced into consciousness. It repeated, this time softer but deeper, as if coming not from outside, but from the very place within him that he had never before opened. You are the boundary, but you are not the end. And then everything changed, not in the world around him, but in the way he perceived it. Space did not disappear, but it was no longer important. The paper, the notebook, the chair, everything remained in its place. But the sense of place expanded, becoming boundless, as if the walls had given way and thought slipped through the cracks of reality itself. He did not know what those words meant, but he knew they were true. He knew it was the beginning. He did not ask, "Who are you?" He did not ask, "Why me?" Because those were not the right questions, nor did they make sense. The right question was, where? And the answer arrived without words, just a pure feeling, not as a location on a map, but as a weight, as a direction in which something waited. It was not a place, but a moment, as if the point of destiny had already been marked, and it was not a question of movement, but of inevitable approach. He was marked, but not by something external, nor by force. He marked himself at the moment he first looked into that mirror and remained, when he dared not to look away. He did not know how much time had passed since his last thought. Was he standing or sitting? Perhaps neither. He was caught within a single moment, stretched between a question and an answer that had not yet arrived, but he already felt it in every fiber of his being. The window was open. The curtains, which were not even there, did not move. A gentle current of air flowed through it, which he did not feel on his skin, but it penetrated deep into his bones. Something was changing, not externally, but internally. It was not a mere idea, but like a fine-tuning of existence itself. He stood up, not knowing when he had done so. The notebook remained open, but he did not look at it. The paper was still there. The words still stood, the same. You are the boundary, but you are not the end. He whispered them, not as a repetition, but as a confirmation, a vow. And then he felt a shift. It was not a step, nor a physical movement, but as if the space around him adapted to an invisible decision, as if the act of complete acceptance reshaped the world around him. He wished to write something down, to hold that moment, to make it palpable, but he knew he did not have to. He knew that everything was already written, not with pen or ink, but by the path he would take, a path that would lead him deeper, further, all the way there, where he had long known, deep within himself he had to arrive. The silence was not empty. It was dense and palpable, like water in which you swim without making waves, as if the very space around him was not seeking an answer, but a recognition that the answer already existed, there, hidden in the air. Vladimir stood motionless, not out of fear nor uncertainty, but out of a deep, almost mystical reverence for what was coming. It did not come in words, nor in images, but to him himself. And then, without any warning, without light or sound, a memory came. Or perhaps it had never left. It was just waiting for the right moment to reappear. It was a Sunday evening, in an apartment that no longer existed. His father, sitting at the kitchen table, smoked quietly, without nervousness, his gaze fixed on Vladimir, then still a boy, directly into his eyes, as if looking through time. "Son," he said, "would you really go into the cosmos? You know it's a journey of no return, darkness, nothing, no one." And Vladimir, without hesitation, without thinking, replied, "Of course I would, Dad. Everything is there." It was not a conversation that was often repeated. Perhaps it never happened again. But now that memory was everything, it was not a message from another world, but from within. It was a deep, unshakable confirmation. For what he sought was not outside. It never had been. And what he would find, it had always been within him. He closed his eyes, not to hide from reality, but to be fully present in it. And in that darkness, which was no longer empty, he felt a direction. It was not a mere instruction, but permission. Permission to go, to seek, to accept that cosmos was not a place, but a state of consciousness, and he knew from this moment on nothing would be the same, not because the world would change, but because he would stop looking at it the same way as before. The door was open. It did not creak. It did not wait for him. It simply existed, open, as if it had always stood that way, without question, without permission. He did not know how he had reached it, nor if he had walked at all. But the step towards it was not a step into the unknown. It was a return to something, without memory of the departure itself. Inside, a hallway stretched, with no source of light, yet no darkness, in some incomprehensible balance. The walls did not reflect sound, but absorbed it, and the floor did not echo, but merely received him. It was as if everything in that building breathed, but not with lungs, rather through the walls, through the air, through him himself. He entered. With each step, the space did not change. He changed, not in form, not in years, but in layers of attention, in his very self-awareness, in the weight of thoughts that were not his, but inexplicably belonged to him. At the end of the hallway, another door, closed, without a lock, without a handle, only a circular indentation, exactly the size of a palm, as if it was not meant to be opened by force, but by presence itself, by understanding. He placed his hand. The door remained still, but the walls began to breathe, not with sound, not with movement, but with a deep, subtle change, as if space itself was folding over, revealing a new form, as if the room was changing its meaning before it would change its shape. And then he felt her, before he saw her, a presence, unmistakable, undeniable. It did not come from the external world, but from within, from his very core. She had no voice, but he felt her speaking, not with words, but with strings that tensed the air, vibrations that penetrated to the bone. It was a gaze without eyes, a touch without skin, a question without sound, and knowledge older than language, more ancient than memory. At the end of the hallway, a space that could not be described in words, only experienced, and in its center, a silhouette, not a woman, not a shadow, not someone, not something, but an essence, that which had called him, always. And even before he knew he was called, she watched him, not with eyes, but with her entire being, as if she had always been facing him, and he had only just arrived. "Do you know where you are?" she asked. Vladimir did not answer. He could not, for he knew, if he spoke, everything would change forever, and if he remained silent, it already had. He did not know how much time had passed, if time even existed where he now found himself. Her presence did not wane, nor did it grow. It simply was, like gravity, invisible, relentless, fundamental, and all-pervading. The room, if it could even be called a room, had no walls. It had only the sensation of boundaries, but no visible surface, like a dream for which you know there is an end, but you never see it. You merely wake from it. They stood, facing each other, or perhaps one within the other. She made no movement, but something within Vladimir shifted. Not his body, not his thought. It was no longer clear what was dream and what was waking. The space in which he stood had no shadows, but it was not bright either. Rather, it possessed its own subtle light, as if everything existed within a single breath, long, calm, without end. Her presence was no longer vague. She did not speak, she did not appear, but she was there, not behind, not in front, but around him, within him, not as a person, not as a spirit, but like a familiar melody you once heard in a dream, but could never quite remember. more like old memories surfacing, his own, but as if they had always been there. He remembered. One day, a ray of light through a dusty window, his grandmother's hands preparing tea, the scent of lilac mixed with the dampness of an old wall, and the shadow on the wall, which was not important then, but now it was. Now he knew she had been observing him even then. She did not observe him fearfully, nor as an enemy, but as someone patiently waiting for a child to remember a dream it had forgotten the moment it was born, like a memory from the other side of the mirror. Why me? He wanted to ask, but the words were lost. The question was not necessary. The answer was already spreading through the space, not as a sentence, but as pure, pervasive knowledge. For it was not why, but always. He felt he could call her, not with words, not with a voice, but with his own presence, as if only one precise feeling, one true impulse, would be enough, and she would be there, completely. But Vladimir did not want to rush, not yet, for what comes without invitation remains, and what you call before its time can vanish forever. He closed his eyes. He let his body be still, not in meditation, but in listening, like waiting for the final note of a song that has not yet been played, but you know it is coming. And then it was as if the air folded, as if the space behind him trembled without a sound. He did not turn around. He knew she was there. He knew she was there, but not as someone standing, not as a shadow, nor as a sound, more like a feeling known from within, but never before seen, like a presence that does not address you, but you know it observes you, not with eyes, but through time, through its own journey towards you, through the centuries that had to happen for you to meet now. He was aware that if he turned, he might see only a wall, or a window, or nothing. But still, he did not turn, for anything he might see could not explain what he felt, and the feeling was dense, like smoke, without fire, like a flicker without light. And he was not alone. He was not a man among men. He was a point in a network that extends beyond all that is known, and in that network, someone was already waiting for him. Always. There was no fear in his body, but there was something else, something akin to the silence before a storm, when the air becomes too thick to breathe, heavy, yet you still, unshakably stand, as if the world around you waits for your next move, to know if there will even be a next second. But he did not breathe for that reason. He breathed because he had to, because breathing was the only remaining fragile link to a world that still had colors, names, smells. In that silence there was no sound, but an echo was heard, the echo of an unspoken question he did not even know he had posed, and the echo had the shape of her, not a face, not a voice, but a presence that entered him like a breath, older than him, yet somehow his own. It came from somewhere deep within, from those profound layers of being where words do not reside, where only a shiver can bring truth. And then for the first time, he felt sadness, but not sadness due to loss, but due to the realization that nothing is ever truly lost. Everything remains within you, with you, waiting, always. The sadness did not come suddenly, nor did it fall upon him like a stone, nor did it weep through his eyes. It came slowly, almost imperceptibly, like a scent not immediately recognized, but which lingers on clothes, like a shadow that does not create darkness, but merely subtracts light. It was not tied to anyone specific, nor did it have a name, a date, or a clear reason, but he knew it. He had known it always. Memories opened on their own, unbidden, not as images, but as a density, as a weight in his body, as if every bone remembered something he no longer knew. Some hand, some laughter, some goodbye he never said. Everything coiled in that silence, in that heavy air. And the hardest thing of all was that this sadness was accurate, was not wrong, nor false, nor exaggerated. It was simply completely present, like a part of him that never wanted to be forgotten. At that moment, Vladimir did not wish to get rid of it. He did not try to erase it, nor suppress it, but let it be there, to permeate him. For somewhere deep within him, he knew that without it, he would not know who he was. And so, in the silence of that sadness, he understood. Not every darkness is something to be feared. Sometimes, it is merely a place where the soul remembers the path it has already once traveled. If you have ever in your life felt that there is something you cannot name, something that transcends the world, words, or reason, if you have ever paused without reason and looked out the window as if something would appear, if it seemed to you that something was calling you, vaguely, from a distance, but you never knew what, perhaps the time has come. Perhaps you are not here by chance. Perhaps you too hear what Vladimir hears, quietly but clearly. If you have, write. Without explanation, without embellishment, just write. Because someone, somewhere, patiently awaits a sign.